So we were inspired by the digital storytelling movement, which began in California about 10 or 12 years ago. And we applied the basic idea of a story circle, which is where a group of people sit around a table to share stories, to develop stories together, to the digital infrastructure that's all around us today. So our basic question was, how does the digital resources, digital infrastructures, websites, metadata, all the things that go to make up the digital, how can the digital support the exchange of stories in ways that validate each other, that help build organizations, that create contexts of trust, that enable organizations to genuinely be digital in a way that helps them grow? That was, if you like, our question. Well, we're obviously based in London, so we're not based in Salford, but in the year of pilot work, we built a number of relationships up here in Salford around Media City UK, and we developed relationships for research with 5 types of organisation, if you like, 5 organisations rather. First of all, educational institutions, because they're places where story is absolutely fundamental to what they do. So we work with the sixth form college, the Salford City College, which is the biggest sixth form educator in the Salford, Manchester area. We work with the Oasis Academy, which during the period of our research moved onto site here at Media City UK as a secondary school provider. We work with the Salford Lads Club, the iconic site of the Smiths album cover, but also a very important place from a century ago where young boys were taken off the street where they may be involved in violence and encouraged to use sport as a way of experiencing their lives differently. We work with them on their archive. We also work with People's Voice Media, which is a community reporters based network, which is actually national but based here in the UK. And we also did work with the Islington Tenants Association, 2 tower blocks in a poor area of Salford, and their website. And we also did work with arts community groups around the Salford Quays programming group that organised events a year or 2 ago, and a number of other organisations. So quite a wide range, in fact, of social and community organisations. We got talking with the Salford City College about how they could become a more digital organisation, how digital resources could be put to use in educating their talented students. They were interested in social media, they were interested in Twitter. In the early days of the research, the students weren't using Twitter very much, but that gradually changed. And we ran various workshops on Twitter about what Twitter was, what the advantages of that platform were. But we then, in the course of our research, discovered that some Twitter experiments were already building with the students in any event, without us intervening. And some of the philosophy teachers in the college were actually, on a Friday night, using the Twitter platform and the hashtag they built to exchange ideas around the curriculum with their students, out of the curriculum space-time, out of the restrictions of the classroom, exchanging ideas. And when we tracked the actual exchanges, we found that students were being validated as producers of knowledge in quite an exciting way. They were sending a link to gender issues in China, let's say. Their teacher at 10 o'clock in the evening on a Friday night, it's important it was a Friday night, were retweeting it and sending it on, saying this looks interesting. Then someone else was picking it up. A discussion was building through the Friday evening. That struck us in a very, very simple way as a new way that students and teachers are recognizing each other as producers of knowledge, enabled through a platform. That's interesting. That's not the traditional model of education. But it can be tracked, it can be supported by a banal platform, if you like. And one of the important things is that storytelling is both a very deep and important thing, but it's also banal. It's what we do all the time. But ways of registering that and valuing that and recognizing that are rare, and the digital provides us with ways of doing that well, and that's what we tried to track. They were an important organisation that trains community reporters to tell stories. People from council estates and whatever, often very poor areas, who have a story, no means to tell it. However, once the story is told, it gets loaded to a website. What happens then? There may be very few viewers. It just sticks there. They were interested in using the digital to change that. So we talked about them about their use of metadata, the use of the tagging of stories, the architecture of the website. And we gradually realized as we were developing that partnership with them that we were doing a new type of social research, which we decided to call social analytics. Adobe had the phrase social analytics, but this was if you like, a sociologist's grab at this term, by which we basically mean looking sociologically at what happens when real social actors with their own needs, their own social and community ends, actually use analytics to rethink through what they want to be in the world, what they want to do in the world, how they want to measure success and failure. And we found that's a very exciting way of looking at a very ordinary but profound thing that's now going on, which is that every organization and every individual is rethinking, if you like, translating their aims, their goals through the possibilities of the digital era, which often involves measuring, but involves a lot of reflecting on measurement, which is a very interesting process. So we developed a model for social analytics, and we put on our website a sort of framework, what we called an outcomes framework, that any organization could think about putting into use, obviously with some researchers who have the time to work with them closely and track what they do, to see whether they can put analytics to better use in their organization. So I hope that that will be usable in other contexts, whether it's by us or by other researchers. If we stay with the type of organization I'm just talking about, but it's typical of many, in the arts community sector, many organizations depend for their funding and other purposes on how they're measured, what happens around their website, how many hits and so on and so forth they get. But not just that, the more subtle things, how people, what journeys they take across the website. Why do they come back to certain places? What do they do when they come back to those places? Is anything built upon that by the organization itself to encourage that, to lead to better feedback loops? All that requires measurement, but measurement that feeds into the broader aims for the organization that are not about counting, they're about values, they're about the community that they want to serve. So I think it introduces a more evidence-based but also subtle and value-based way of thinking about digital presence, if you like. Every organization needs a digital presence now, but how to think in a creative way about how to measure that so that the measurements can lead to adjustments, which lead to improved action, which can then be measured in turn and so on. That's a much more subtle process, and what we tried to do was track that process as it was developing within that organization, playing it back to them so that they could see how they were adapting to the measurements. That's, I think, a workable model of research that could be applied in many situations, and we call it social analytics.